Hello, so in this video I'm going to go through the birth chart of Albert Einstein. In the process we are going to learn some important lessons. Have a look at his birth chart. Let's start from his rising nakshatra, and that's Ardra. I think his eccentric personality and physical appearance is due to this Ardra's rising. An Ardra rising native can have an unkempt physical appearance and can be some sort of an explorer. Mercury is a ruler of the first house and the falls in the 10th house. That describes that his life's purpose was centered around his career. And Mercury and Saturn in his chart in Uttarapada are in conjunction, which is a sign that he's a patient problem solver. In one of the quotes credited to him, it is said that he described himself as a patient problem solver and not a genius, and I believe that's a lot to do with Mercury and Saturn. If you do happen to find this combination, I think no problem is going to be too difficult for you because you'll find a way. Have a look at the 10th house. The 10th house ruler in the main and the Navamsha chart falls in the 9th house. This is a pattern, and the ruler is Jupiter, which signifies he was meant to be a lifelong student. Secondly, this 9th house association, and the 9th house is the 12th house from the 10th house. He was meant to have his career being built on a permanent basis in a police forum, which has been his story. He has moved away, and we'll come to those relocation timelines. But Jupiter in the 9th in Dhanishta is a sign of massive fame. I've always mentioned a Dhanishta native can attract fame, and when Jupiter is there, fame can be massive. Now, what exactly was he meant to be famous for? Have a look at this illustration. This describes the constellation of Purvarapada. Why am I referring to this constellation? Sun in his chart is in the 10th in Purvarapada. Lord Eja Ekapet was all about bringing a change in the society. Fist in the air, no, we can do this, we can transform the world. If you have to bring some sort of a change in the society, it has to be born out of the 8th house. What do I find here? The 9th house ruler, which is Saturn and Rahu. Rahu is in the 8th house, and the 8th house ruler is again Saturn, which goes into the 10th house. What I find beautiful in his chart is the connection the 8th, 9th and the 10th house have. Or should I say the 8th and the 9th house. The houses linked to future and research, future driven by higher education, and the 10th house, the career. So that connection is an explanation, in my view, behind his scientific endeavors. Furthermore, he has moon in the constellation of Jyeshta in the 6th, which is symbolizing his desire to be the best in his line of work. And he can be behind scientific inventions of some kind. And since moon doesn't have anyone as company, that's a sign the individual can find the necessary motivation to go after one's goals. Venus in the 10th in Ravati is exalted, which is a sign that he can have a very inventive way of doing things, can be blessed with natural imaginative ability, something others may not have thought about. He may have the capability to imagine future possibilities somehow. Now, Mars ruling the money house and placed in the 8th house is an indication that his research would be on large scale, perhaps may have global consequences, which was the case. So let's go through some important life events he's gone through and map it through the Dasha table. This might help you understand how to read the Dasha table. In the year 1895, he was in the process of moving into Venus's Mahadasha from Ketu, and at that time, a life-changing event took place. He moved from Germany to Switzerland, to Zurich, to pursue higher education. That was the first time he relocated. And then 1905 is classified as a miracle year for him, as he came up with all kinds of equations and changed how physics was pursued thereafter. At that time he was going through Venus and Rahu's chapter. Now, anyone wanting to change the future, it has to be linked to Rahu, in my view. Rahu is all about imagining a future in a different manner. And then Rahu in his chart is in the 8th house, and I've already mentioned Rahu is also linked to the 9th house, the house of higher education. And secondly, Rahu in his chart is having a direct relationship with Mars. So his career is directly linked to Rahu in many ways, and Rahu is always behind scientific inventions of some kind. At that time, the Mahadasha was of Venus. So Venus in an exalted position and Rahu being the Antadasha, and the positions it's occupying in his chart in Uttarashadha are justifications behind this year being a miracle year for him. Right, so early 1903 he was married, and that was right at the beginning of this Venus and Rahu's chapter. I've always maintained if a person is about to enter Venus and Rahu's time phase, there's every possibility of the individual experiencing companionship. But I also find Ketu in the marriage house in the Navamsha, which is a strong indicator that early marriage could lead to complications. And Saturn in his chart is in the 10th in the main chart, also signifies his work might come in the way of his marriage. And it happened during Saturn's Dasha in 1919. In early February, he divorced his first wife and then married again. So under Ketu's chapter or Saturn's chapter, he was meant to go through some difficulty in his marriage, and it happened under Saturn, and he decided to marry again. If Jupiter is somehow linked to the marriage house, there's every possibility of the person being able to start their lives again, marry again. Now, 1921 was the time he was given the Nobel Prize. At that time, he was going through Sun and Venus's chapter. Venus can bring fame, and that too on a material plane. His Nobel Prize was also accompanied by a hefty check. I think in today's money it was about 500,000 US dollars or more than that. So Venus brought him that good fortune. Well, if you look at the money house in both the charts, in the main and the Navamsha, in the main it's ruled by Mars, and Mars is in the 8th house. And in the Navamsha it's ruled by Saturn, which again falls in the 8th house. That's a sign his fortunes from a money point of view are always going to fluctuate. So he did win this big prize money, but when he divorced his first wife, he gave away all that wealth, and he didn't live a life full of luxury or comfort, so he lived a normal life. So his chart isn't suggesting he was going to be a wealthy individual. He was going to get worldwide recognition as Jupiter is and Danishta, and that he did. In 1933, Hitler came to power, so he decided he needs to move elsewhere. So that was the time he was going to Rahu's chapter, and I've time and again mentioned Rahu's chapter can lead to relocation, and Jupiter in his chart is ruling the 10th, is in the 12th house from the 10th house and the 9th house, which is a strong indication he was meant to build his life in a place foreign. So during Rahu's, circumstances were created for him to move elsewhere. So he's firstly moved to Belgium, then England, then finally by late 1933 he moved to the US, and that's where he stayed for a very long time, all the way till the end of his life. And after this Mars's chapter, he entered Rahu's Mahadasha, and he must have done his best work there. And he left the world in 1955, right at the end of this Rahu's Mahadasha. So I'm hoping some of the life events I've shared here made sense to you from the Dasha table. If you have any questions how to read the Dasha table, you can post a comment. I'd like to take you back to his miracle year, 1905, when he invented the formula energy equals mc square. And it got me thinking, if you imagine you to be the mass and you're 17 kilograms, and if you were to calculate how much energy is stored within you, it would come out to a really big number. I think more energy than 100,000 bombs that were thrown in Hiroshima would produce. So that got me thinking that there's this massive energy frozen within us, it's sleeping within us, howsoever you want to imagine it. And if you look at this equation from a spiritual point of view, if we now were to call energy as God, and mass as us, and c square, the speed of light square, as awakening. So if you look at this from a spiritual point of view, I know I'm saying something not linked to astrology, but I wanted to share that with you. If you go as per Bhagavad Gita, it says that this formless form of the God resides within us. So maybe that's the creative energy that resides within us. If you go as per Christianity, it's mentioned the kingdom of the God was within us. I've made the reference there. If you go as per Sikhism, which says that God is within the soul and soul is within the God. So again, it's a case of this creative energy, God, is within you. And as for Islam, there's a very famous quotation which says, what you seek is within you. So that again, it's referring to that infinite energy that's stored within us, which we are classifying as God. As per Judaism, it's said the divine soul is literally the part of God. And as per Buddhism, you come to the conclusion that there is Buddha in every one of us. So basically, all these spiritual philosophies are referring to that one energy which resides within us, which scientifically can also be proven as E equals mc square. So this equation is not going to change, even if Mars was taken elsewhere in the world, the same Mars in Japan, the same Mars in Canada, Egypt, India, elsewhere. It's going to result in the same energy. That's the point I'm trying to make. In any case, I hope this discussion on Albert Einstein's birth chart made sense. And if you have any questions, please post a comment. This is it. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.